In 2015, a man named Mark Ellis and his 18-year-old daughter Hannah vanished without a trace after leaving home for what was meant to be a weekend vacation. Over the next 8 years, law enforcement launched multiple searches across state lines, followed dozens of leads, and re-interviewed family and friends. But despite the media attention and public pressure, their whereabouts remained unknown. The case went cold. Until 2023, when a damning discovery changed everything. What happened to Mark and Hannah Ellis? Why did they disappear? And how did a supposed father-daughter trip turn into one of the most disturbing and bizarre cases police had ever encountered? Let's uncover the disturbing details of a case that took detectives over 8 years to finally unravel. Mark Ellis was a 56-year-old maintenance worker married with 2 children. He lived with his wife, Janice, their 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, and their 14-year-old son, Josh. The family of 4 lived a quiet life and had no history of trouble with the law. In the summer of 2015, Mark told his wife he wanted to take their daughter on a short weekend getaway, a father-daughter trip before she began college. It wasn't unusual and nothing seemed out of place. They packed a few bags, left the house, and were never seen again. And this is where our story begins. In December of 2015, just 2 weeks before Christmas, the Ellis home was quiet but not unusual. It was a Friday morning. Cold. The kind of morning where you could still see your breath outside. Mark Ellis had already packed the car, just a small duffel bag and a cooler. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man with a plan. Inside, 18-year-old Hannah was finishing up her breakfast. She wore leggings, a hoodie, and carried a canvas backpack. Her mother, Janice, was in the kitchen too, cleaning up dishes and reminding them to text when they arrived. Mark told her not to worry. They'd only be gone for the weekend. Back by Sunday, he said. At around 8:15 a.m., the 2 of them stepped out into the driveway. Their son, 14-year-old Josh, was still asleep upstairs. He wouldn't remember hearing them leave. Just the sound of the front door clicking shut and the quiet hum of the engine as the car pulled away. A neighbor across the street later told police she waved at them as they backed out. Mark nodded. Hannah smiled. Nothing strange. Nothing to suggest that they were never coming back. Roughly 45 minutes later, surveillance footage caught them at a gas station off a highway exit. Mark pumped the gas. Hannah went inside to grab 2 bottles of water and a pack of gum. They didn't speak much. No arguments. No rushing. Just calm, like they had all the time in the world. That was the last time anyone would see either of them alive. After that, they disappeared. The car was never seen on any traffic cameras. Their phones stopped pinging cell towers shortly after noon. No one received a call, a message, a photo, nothing. Sunday came and went. Janice paced the living room, checking her phone every 5 minutes. She called Mark, no answer. She texted Hannah, no read receipts. At first, she assumed maybe they lost service. Maybe they were taking the scenic route back. But by Monday morning, panic had set in. By 9 a.m., Janice walked into the local police station and filed a missing persons report. Her husband and daughter had vanished, and no one, not even law enforcement, had any idea where to start looking. The investigation into Mark and Hannah Ellis's disappearance began immediately after Janice filed the report. At first, police treated it like any other missing persons case. A father and daughter gone for a weekend hadn't returned. Maybe they got stuck somewhere, maybe they extended the trip. But within 48 hours, that theory started to fall apart. Detectives began tracing their steps. They recovered CCTV footage from a gas station clear as day. Mark at the pump, Hannah walking out with a snack in her hand. That footage gave investigators a timestamp, but nothing after. No credit card activity. No phone calls. Not a single traffic cam picked up their vehicle after that point. They widened the search. Local hotels, campsites, emergency rooms. Nothing. Within a week, a full-scale search was launched. Police combed through forests, sent divers into nearby lakes, even used helicopters to scan remote areas. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Dozens of volunteers showed up to help, walking mile after mile of rough terrain. Still nothing. Mark's car, a silver sedan, never turned up. It wasn't abandoned, stolen, or torched. It had vanished like it had been swallowed by the earth. Detectives started looking at bank accounts. Mark had withdrawn a small amount of cash the day before they left, but beyond that, no transactions. Hannah's social media went dead. No logins, no messages. Her phone went dark the same day they disappeared, never to ping another tower again. Naturally, suspicion started to rise. Investigators questioned Janice, then Josh. Had Mark ever mentioned running away? Did Hannah ever talk about leaving? Nothing came up. No signs of family trouble. No hints of abuse. Just a quiet household that suddenly shattered. In the months that followed, every lead turned cold. A body found in a river? Not them. A car wreck in the next state? Wrong vehicle. A woman reported seeing a man and teen girl at a motel? The timeline didn't match. 1 year passed. Then 2. Then 5. Eventually, the file was moved to the cold case unit. Detectives rotated out. Resources faded until something crazy happened. In April of 2023, police in France received a tip from a local property owner, a tip that would blow open a case that had been cold for nearly 8 years. The man owned a small cottage just outside the town center. A few years earlier, he had leased the property to what appeared to be a small family, an older man, a young woman, and a small child. They said they were from out of the country and needed a long-term place to stay. They paid in cash. Always on time. Polite, but private. The man didn't ask many questions. It wasn't unusual. They kept to themselves for the most part and nothing seemed out of place. But behind the walls of that guest house, something far more disturbing was happening. The landlord told police that every few weeks, especially late at night, strange noises would come from the cottage. Not arguments. Not fighting. Just screaming. Sometimes muffled. Sometimes sudden. And most disturbingly loud, drawn-out moaning that didn't sound like pain. At first, he assumed it was a private matter and chose not to interfere. But then, just days before he came forward, he noticed something unsettling. He caught the man outside in the early morning, digging a large hole behind the guest house. Quiet, focused, covered in dirt. Police arrived and immediately noticed the disturbed earth. A team began digging behind the property. Less than 3 feet down, they found a body, wrapped in plastic, recently buried. Inside the home, they found forged documents, hidden IDs, and old personal items that didn't match the names the tenants had given. The man was arrested immediately. The child, confused and scared, was taken into protective custody. Within days, authorities confirmed the unthinkable. When officers arrested the man on site, he offered no resistance. He was calm, cooperative, almost too calm. At first, he claimed the young woman was his wife and that her death was an accident. But as detectives began questioning him, the story quickly unraveled into something far more disturbing than anyone was prepared for. The man sitting across the table wasn't just any fugitive. He was Mark Ellis, the American father who vanished 8 years earlier with his teenage daughter. The woman buried behind the cottage was Hannah Ellis, the daughter he had disappeared with, and the child they had been raising as their own was exactly that. Their biological child. In a chilling confession, Mark revealed the truth. Shortly after leaving home in 2015, he and Hannah had crossed the border using forged documents. They had eloped, fleeing not just their family but their identities. Because by then, Hannah was already pregnant. Mark claimed they were in love and saw no way to stay in their home country without being discovered. They eventually settling in France where no one knew them. There, they lived for years as husband and wife, raised their son, blended in. But behind closed doors, their relationship was far from normal. Mark admitted that the disturbing noises the landlord had reported were not fights, but sex. He and Hannah were heavily involved in BDSM. He described their relationship in graphic detail, telling detectives they often engaged in intense and violent acts, sessions that involved restraints, choking, and physical control. Then, one night in early 2023, something went wrong. During one of their sessions, Hannah lost consciousness. Mark claimed he thought she had merely fainted, but when she didn't wake up, panic set in. He didn't call for help. He didn't report the death. Instead, he wrapped her body in plastic and buried her behind the house, hoping to disappear again before anyone noticed. But that wasn't the end of it. When investigators asked about the child, Mark hesitated. Then, coldly, he confessed he had killed the boy. He said he couldn't leave behind any evidence. No witnesses. He planned to bury the child's body elsewhere, burn what he could, and vanish, start over in another country under another name. But before he could follow through, the landlord called the police. That one decision, sparked by a strange night and a pit in his backyard, stopped Mark Ellis from disappearing a second time, and exposed a secret that had been buried for nearly a decade. The news of Mark Ellis's arrest and the horrific truth that followed sent shockwaves through everyone who had once known him. But no one was more devastated than the family he left behind. Back home, Janice Ellis had lived in quiet torment for 8 years. She had spent nearly a decade believing her husband and daughter were dead or taken or lost. She had clung to hope despite silence, held onto photos, kept Hannah's room just as it was the day she left. When investigators contacted her with the truth, she was blindsided. Her husband hadn't been taken. He hadn't been a victim. He had run off with their daughter, gotten her pregnant, built a life with her, and in the end buried her in a backyard. Sources close to the family say Janice collapsed when she was told the grief, the betrayal, the horror, all at once. She wasn't just mourning the loss of her daughter anymore, she was grappling with the fact that her child had been manipulated, isolated, and ultimately died under unthinkable circumstances at the hands of her own father. And then came the second blow, learning there had been a child. Her grandchild, a boy she never knew existed, and he too was gone, silenced by the same man who once stood in their family photos. Josh Ellis, Hannah's younger brother, was 14 when they vanished. Now in his 20s, he was forced to process a reality far darker than anything he'd imagined. For years, he had wondered if they were still alive. Now he knew, and the truth was worse than anything he had feared. The case made international headlines. The details, incest, abuse, murder, sparked outrage, disbelief, and public revulsion. Mental health experts weighed in. So did criminologists. Many described it as a rare and deeply disturbing example of genetic sexual attraction, a psychological phenomenon where estranged family members develop romantic feelings after being reunited. But no amount of clinical explanation could soften the blow. A mother lost her daughter. A son lost his sister. A family was destroyed, not by accident, not by tragedy, but by choice. Mark Ellis now faces multiple charges, including murder, incest, and the unlawful disposal of human remains. He is awaiting trial in the country where he was arrested. Prosecutors have already made it clear they intend to seek the maximum penalty. As for Janice and Josh, they've chosen to grieve in silence. No public statements, no interviews, just heartbreak and the long road of living with what was left behind. If this story left you shocked, you're not alone. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the most horrifying crimes don't happen in the shadows of strangers, but inside families, behind closed doors, hidden in plain sight. For more true crime stories that expose the darkest truths, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We cover the cases others won't touch, the ones that leave you speechless. Stay alert. Stay safe. And remember, evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a father on a weekend trip.